The marble floor of the lobby gleamed under the chandelier lights. In the middle of it all, a young waitress knelt down, her hands trembling as she tried to gather scattered papers that had flown everywhere. Her neat black dress uniform and white shirt, once tidy, now looked small and vulnerable against the vast, polished space. People in suits surrounded her, their phones lifted, recording, some even laughing. Just a few feet away, a young man in a sharp grey suit stood tall, arms crossed over his chest. His lips curved into a smug smile as he looked down at her. He didn't bend to help. He didn't even glance at the papers. He only watched her struggle, as if her humiliation was his entertainment. The waitress kept her head low, her long brown hair falling loose from the ponytail she had tied that morning. Every time her fingers reached for another page, the sound of muffled laughter echoed around the hall, slicing deeper than any cruel word. To everyone else, she was just a servant on her knees. To him, she was nothing more than a joke. But what no one in that lobby knew was that this moment of shame would not break her. Hidden in those papers and hidden in her life was something that would turn the tables in a way none of them could imagine. A few hours earlier, Tiffany had walked into that building with nothing more than a stack of folders pressed carefully against her chest. She wasn't an employee there, not really. She worked nights as a waitress in a small restaurant nearby. But sometimes the restaurant catered for the company's events, and Tiffany had been asked to carry over a set of documents. To her, it was just another errand. To everyone else in that building, she was invisible. That's when Jake noticed her. He was only an intern, but he carried himself like he owned the place. The way he adjusted his tie, the way he spoke loudly so people turned their heads. It all screamed of someone desperate to be seen. When he spotted Tiffany walking through the lobby, his smirk appeared instantly. "Careful with those papers," he muttered as he passed her, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "If you drop them, no one's going to bother helping you." Tiffany bit her lip and kept walking. She'd heard worse before, customers snapping their fingers at her in restaurants, people looking past her as if she wasn't even there. But there was something about Jake's tone, that casual cruelty, that made her chest tighten. She told herself to stay calm, to ignore it, to just finish the errand and get out. But what Tiffany didn't realise was that Jake wasn't finished with her yet. The lobby was crowded that afternoon, suits rushing to and from elevators, heels clicking against the marble floor. Tiffany kept her head down, clutching the folders tightly, determined to walk straight through without drawing attention. But Jake was already waiting. He stepped into her path with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "In a hurry, are we?" he said, loud enough for a few nearby heads to turn. Tiffany tried to sidestep him, but as she did, Jake brushed against her shoulder just hard enough to knock the stack of papers from her arms. They scattered like leaves in the wind, pages sliding across the polished floor, some landing at the feet of strangers. Gasps echoed through the hall, followed quickly by laughter. A man in a dark suit chuckled as he stepped aside, making no move to help. A woman in heels actually pulled out her phone, already recording. Tiffany dropped to her knees, her heart racing, her cheeks burning. She reached for the nearest page, but her hand shook so badly that she fumbled it twice before finally gripping the paper. The sound of muffled laughter only grew louder, sharper, crueler. Above her, Jake crossed his arms and tilted his head. "Told you," he said casually, as if he had predicted the whole thing. His voice carried in the open space, making the humiliation sting all the more. Tiffany wanted to disappear, to vanish from the marble floor and all the eyes staring down at her. But instead, she kept gathering the pages, one by one, each movement slower than the last. Laughter rippled through the lobby like a cruel wave. It wasn't just Jake anymore. A cluster of young employees leaned against the wall, smirking as Tiffany crawled across the shiny floor to gather the last of her papers. One of them muttered loudly, "She looks right at home down there." Another chuckled and added, "Maybe they should hire her as a cleaner instead." The comments stung, but what hurt more was the way almost everyone else just stood there, watching. Some shook their heads as if it were none of their business, while others lifted their phones higher, eager to capture every second. The glow of the screens reflected in their eyes as they recorded her shame. Tiffany's vision blurred as tears welled up, but she refused to let them fall. She pressed her lips together, swallowing back the lump in her throat, and kept picking up the papers one by one. She knew if she stopped, if she froze, she would break completely. Jake leaned slightly closer, his voice sharp enough for her to hear. "You see? No one cares enough to help you. You'll always be the girl on the floor." Tiffany's hand trembled over another page, her chest tight, her breath shallow. She told herself to keep going, to get up, to finish. But even as she fought to stay calm, she couldn't ignore the faint sound of a whisper from somewhere in the crowd. It wasn't laughter, it wasn't mockery, it was a hushed voice, urgent and almost afraid. "Do you know who she really is?" The whisper spread like a spark through dry grass. At first it was only one voice, quiet and unsure. But then another head turned, then another. People who had been laughing only moments ago now leaned closer to each other, their expressions shifting from amusement to curiosity. Tiffany, still kneeling, didn't notice the change right away. Her focus was on the papers in her trembling hands. She pressed them tightly to her chest, afraid another slip would give Jake more reason to sneer. But a man standing near the elevators squinted at the cover sheet of one folder lying on the floor. His eyes widened. "That's not just paperwork," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "That's the contract, the merger deal everyone's been waiting on." The words carried further than he meant them to. A hush fell over part of the crowd. Phones lowered ever so slightly, laughter thinning into an uneasy silence. Suddenly, the image of a young woman scrambling for papers didn't look so ordinary anymore. Jake, oblivious, chuckled as if nothing had changed. He stepped closer, tilting his head. "Hold it tight," he said mockingly. "You wouldn't want to lose your little side job." His smirk returned, but a few people behind him weren't laughing anymore. They were staring at Tiffany as if trying to put together a puzzle they hadn't noticed until now. Tiffany gathered the last page, her breath shaky but steady, and rose slowly to her feet. Her eyes were red, but there was a flicker in them, something Jake missed, but others did not. The hush in the lobby deepened. Tiffany could feel the weight of it pressing against her back as she held the papers close. She didn't know why the laughter had faded, why the sharp sting of mockery had been replaced by murmurs. All she knew was that eyes were on her, more than before, and not just with ridicule. From the corner of the room, a woman in a tailored suit leaned toward her colleague. Her voice was barely audible, but it carried. "I've seen her before," she whispered. "Not here, at the chairman's house." Her colleague blinked, startled. "You're saying she's—" He cut himself off, glancing around as if afraid the words themselves could cause trouble. The rumour spread faster this time. One by one, people lowered their phones, their smirks fading into cautious silence. Some looked at Tiffany with wide eyes, others with sudden guilt, as though realising they might have laughed at the wrong person. Jake, standing closest, remained blind to the shift. He mistook the silence for fear of him. Straightening his tie, he smirked proudly as if he had orchestrated the entire scene. "What did I tell you?" he said loudly. "Nobody cares. She's just another face in the crowd." But the crowd didn't echo his laughter anymore. Their stares had grown heavier, more uncertain. Tiffany felt it too, though she didn't yet understand why. She only knew that something had changed. And then, cutting through the tension like a blade, a strong, commanding voice echoed from the far end of the lobby. The single word cut through the air like thunder. "Enough." The lobby fell into silence. Even the faint hum of the elevators seemed to vanish. Tiffany froze, the papers still pressed against her chest. Her breath caught somewhere between relief and fear. Every head turned toward the far end of the room, where a figure stepped forward with calm, deliberate strides. Jake blinked, his smirk faltering for the first time. He straightened his tie again, forcing a laugh. "Oh, come on," he said, trying to mask the unease in his voice. "It was just a joke. She knows her place." He glanced down at Tiffany, expecting her to shrink even further under his words. But Tiffany didn't move. She looked up at him slowly, her eyes red from holding back tears. Yet there was something else behind them now, something steady, unshaken. For the first time that day, Jake found himself unsettled by her silence. The crowd shifted, restless. No one laughed anymore. Some stepped back, instinctively creating a path as the figure in the distance drew closer. The weight of authority was unmistakable, and every step echoed like a warning. Jake forced a smile, as though the attention still belonged to him. "See?" he said loudly, his voice cracking just enough to betray him. "Nobody's going to save you. You'll always be on the floor." Tiffany's lips parted, and though her voice was soft, it carried more strength than Jake expected. "We'll see about that." And in that moment, the commanding figure finally came into view. The crowd parted as the man stepped into full view. His presence alone was enough to shift the air in the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark, tailored suit, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove who he was. Every eye followed him, and the whispers died into silence. Jake's smirk vanished. He swallowed hard, recognizing the man instantly. The chairman, the one person in the company whose word was final. The man's gaze swept the room before settling on Tiffany. His expression softened as he saw her clutching the papers to her chest, still standing in the middle of the lobby where moments ago she had been mocked. He walked closer, each step measured, and when he reached her side, he spoke in a voice that was calm but carried weight. "You don't need to pick up another page," he said gently. "You've already done enough." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tiffany blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. But then the man turned his eyes to Jake, and the softness was gone, replaced by cold steel. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" His words echoed off the marble walls. Jake stammered, his confidence crumbling. I didn't know. She was just a waitress." The man's jaw tightened. "She is not just anything. She is my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. The phones that had been raised were now lowered, as if no one dared move. Faces that had been full of mockery minutes ago now shifted to shame and disbelief. Tiffany stood frozen, her heart pounding, the world spinning around her. For so long she had endured people looking past her, dismissing her worth. And now, in a single moment, the truth stripped Jake of his power and left the crowd stunned. Jake's face drained of colour. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The arrogance he had worn like armour was gone, replaced by panic. His eyes darted around the lobby as if searching for someone, anyone, to step in and save him. No one moved. The chairman's gaze never wavered. "You humiliated her," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "In front of this entire room. And for what? To feel taller while someone else was on the floor?" Jake stuttered, his voice breaking. I didn't know who she was. I swear I didn't." "That's the problem," the chairman interrupted. "You thought it mattered." The words hit harder than any shout. The crowd shifted uneasily. People who had laughed earlier now lowered their heads, unable to meet Tiffany's eyes. Phones slipped quietly into pockets. The shame had spread beyond Jake. It clung to everyone who had stood by and done nothing. The chairman turned to one of the senior managers standing nearby. "Escort him out. He has no place here." Two security staff stepped forward. Jake tried to protest, but his voice cracked under the weight of silence. His arms flailed helplessly, but no one came to his defense. As they led him toward the exit, the same people who had cheered his cruelty now turned away, refusing to look at him. Tiffany stood motionless, still clutching the papers, her chest rising and falling as if she had just run a marathon. She wasn't sure what felt heavier, the humiliation she had endured or the sudden shift in the room. For the first time, people weren't looking at her with ridicule or pity. They were looking at her with something closer to respect. The lobby was quiet again, but the silence no longer carried mockery. It carried weight. Tiffany stood in the centre of it all, the stack of papers held firmly in her arms. For the first time since stepping into that building, she didn't feel small. Her father placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice softer now. "You don't have to prove yourself to anyone here," he said. "Not today, not ever." Tiffany nodded, though her throat tightened with emotion. She wasn't thinking about her last name or what people now knew about her. She was thinking about the moment she had been on the floor, alone, with laughter surrounding her, and how she had chosen not to break. That was the strength she carried, and no one could take it from her. As she walked toward the elevators, heads turned, but the stares were different now. Some were filled with guilt, others with respect. A few lowered their eyes completely, unable to face her after what they had done. Tiffany didn't need their apologies. She only needed to know that she had stood back up. When the doors closed behind her, the people left in the lobby were still unsettled, their reflections clear in the polished marble floor. They had witnessed cruelty, and they had stayed silent. And in that silence, they had revealed something about themselves. Lesson: sometimes the measure of a person isn't in how they stand when everything is easy, but in how they rise after being pushed to the ground. Question for the audience: if you had been in that lobby, would you have stayed quiet with the crowd, or would you have stepped forward to help? And with that, Tiffany's story came to an end. But for everyone who watched, it left a question that lingered long after the lights of the lobby dimmed.